Yo, this is Mack, and you're watching Hospitality TV, boy.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Hospitality TV. Today we are in-house with Houston Mack. Couldn't be more excited to be here. For the few people that don't know about you, sir, in this industry, could you give us a brief background on your introduction to wine, how you got into the business?
Oh man, I'm just a guy, man. What do you mean? What do you mean? I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't watch old episodes of Frasier. That really kind of gave me the courage to invite wine into my life. And it was through that I took a couple of wine classes and really kind of honed in and focused on wine. And that was kind of the beginning of everything. I was already working in a restaurant, some crappy restaurants, but those, and it was kind of where I started, right? Shitty restaurants, and then kind of moved on and, better restaurants or better wineries.
So you're working in finance, correct, in Texas?
Yeah.
So what made you make the leap from working in that industry into the restaurant industry?
Well, because I worked in that industry when it was, when I was going to college, right?
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think a lot of people gravitate, the restaurant business is pretty transient, right? Like, a lot of people go there because you can make the most amount of money for the shortest period of time, right? And everybody kind of has this notion of like, hey, we're going on to bigger and better things, right? Whether that's you graduate from college and get a real job, or is it, you're an actor going on to be an actor and you become discovered. But for me, it was just, everybody, that's where you worked. I worked in restaurants that whole time.
Right.
And when I finally left to get a job, it was in finance. I worked for City Investment Services. But what I realized was that I didn't have, it was missing something. My life seemed to be missing something. I always spoke to people on the phone. I missed that human interaction of being able to walk up to a table with like someone you didn't know, right? And to be able to read their body language and kind of figure that out and get social, cues and body cues from them to figure out like, did they like this thing that I just brought to them or not, or to see them relax. And that was telling. And I felt like I needed that. That was something that was totally missing from my life. And so I said, you know what, the hell with this, I'll quit and I'll figure it out, right? I was like, hey, maybe I'll go back to school. But in the meantime, I went back to restaurants because that felt right to me, right? And then it was during that time, I was laid off, had some severance, that started to watch old episodes of Frasier, and that really kind of got the idea of like wine, having wine in my life, and then from there, it just kind of took on a life of its own.
Yeah, that's funny. One of my first jobs after I came back, I went to high school in Peru. When I first came back, I got a job in finance in San Francisco, working as a ticket runner for the Pacific Stock Exchange downtown. And I eventually left that and got into restaurants also. But when I came back in the restaurants, when I came back to San Francisco, I was working at Aqua in San Francisco, and it had been the closest thing. The guys on the trading floor are just so smart and sharp and quick. And getting back on the floor with a bunch of really well-spoken professionals was the closest thing I've ever been to finance in the restaurant industry. It was super fun. But so you went into restaurants, and then you're working in San Antonio, and then you win the Best Young Sommelier competition, right?
Yeah. So I think I studied my ass off.
What was the preparation? How did you come for that?
Well, for me, I think you have to self-awareness. You got to know how you learn, and for me, it was really about writing things down. So for me, I bought the biggest dry erase board that would fit in my dining room. I hung it on the wall, and I just wrote things over and over and over. And from the hours of 10:30 when I got off at night to 4:30 in the morning, I would study, and that would be kind of how that worked. And then kind of really trying to understand like what real wine was. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you could read like the critics, and they told you one thing, but also at this time, I remember I emailed. So email was a new thing, right? Websites were a new thing. So I found all the top restaurants in America, and I would try to see if their wine list was online. Some of them weren't. I remember, I think it was at Charlie Trotter's, I can't remember. One of the top restaurants, they actually faxed me a copy of their wine list. And so I would take all the wine lists and spread them all out, and then you would take it section by section. So it would be like, okay, hey, cool, Chablis. So everybody has this producer, Davistat and Ragamine. Okay, all right, cool. So then I would go back and say, okay, who has those wines? Who sells those wines in my area? So then I'd go in, and then I would buy 3 bottles of them. One bottle we would taste, the other 3 bottles we would divide, divide by 2 the total cost. And so it was this thing that I could taste it with my staff, and then I built this wine list off for onesies and twosies.
Right.
And that was kind of it, how I got familiar with like some of the better producers, or what were perceived to be the better producers at that time. Because they were just, you know, there weren't a lot of people around me when I was building this first list. And so, you know, you acquire knowledge, and the only way that you really know that you know it if you're not using it on the floor, right? You know, it's San Antonio, Texas. Like nobody was drinking Sancerre or talking about wines from the Loire, or, you know, or anything like that, right? So, you know, it felt like, hey, maybe I should, you know, join this competition, and this would really show me how much I knew. And I didn't care about who I competed against, because it was really just about competing against myself, and that was the only thing that I cared about. Right?
Amazing. So from there, you moved into the TFL group, which was a huge leap. Did you reach out to them after that, or did that kind of put you on the map?
No.
Where they're looking at, oh, we should look into this guy?
So before that, remember there was a magazine, Wine Enthusiast, a copy that was called Wine List Confidential that had come out. And I remember reading that magazine and being so inspired that I felt like, oh man, I'm going to call these people. So I called every single one of the sommeliers and asked, could I come work there, could I stage? So I called Jason Smith over at Charlie Trotters at the time, and he's like, sure. So yeah, so we're talking about dates. I called Paul Roberts, who was the only master sommelier in the state of Texas at the time, and I got a voicemail. So I called, just left my name, and we played phone tag. And as soon as I left a message of what I really wanted, like, hey, I want to come in, like, stage with you, he never called me back. And I was like, oh shit, maybe I bring that bridge, or, you know, and I didn't understand why he never called me back. And a friend of a friend said, I know him, and I can set this up for you, and totally set it up. And so I was going to be in Houston, doing the regional part of that competition. And, you know, and so they hooked it up, and Paul was like, hey, show up at the back door at like 4 o'clock. So I show up, and here's this energetic guy, just running around on the phone, talking. And he's like, I go sit up in like this meeting room, this big old conference room, and he's like, hey, this is what we're going to be working with, those be the wine list. And we start talking. He gets off the phone as we were walking downstairs. He says, hey man, that was on a Thursday. That Monday, he had accepted the job to be the beverage director for all of Thomas Keller's properties.
Wow.
And so we we walked down the stairs, got an espresso. I told him my story, what I was doing, what I was up to. Later, after that, Josh Reynolds comes by. Josh, now who's the writer for Tanzer, but before that, he was the national sales manager for Rosenthal. So he stops by. We start drinking margaritas, hanging out in the pre-shift, and then after that, we hit the floor. Paul's like, hey, let's work the floor. And something just clicked. And here I was, like, working with this guy. He was brilliant. It was amazing, you know. It just felt so cutting edge, like the stuff that he was doing, the stuff that he was talking about. But we would just take the floor. We had like this chemistry. He was like, hey, you got guys, like, I got that table. And we just kind of worked the floor, and that's kind of how that worked. And at the end of the night,
it clicked so well for you. I mean, was there a moment though? I mean, just jumping up into this level that's, you know, that's so high up. Was there any moments where you're like, holy shit, this is operating at a completely higher level?
Well, absolutely. But I think the thing of it is that what most people get caught up in is like this thing of greatness. Greatness isn't this elusive thing that only exists amongst, you know, the greatest among us, right? You know what I mean? Like, I think opportunities present themselves, and you either rise to the occasion or you don't. Either you're prepared or not. And I felt like on those days I was prepared. Like, you would come to my house, dude, like 3 o'clock in the morning, and like I'm pouring, water out of a wine bottle, practicing service on the table. Right. You know, my backhand, hugging the guest, like all of those things before I even met him. Right? You know what I mean? And this was my moment when it was there. I knew, you know what I mean? Like he's like, and like all throughout that we're carrying a conversation. Right. Throughout having service, and that was the beauty of it. And at the end, he was just like, "Hey kid, I gotta hire 6 sommeliers. I like you. What do you think?" And I was like, "I think I'm gonna go with you."
So, when you walked into TFL, how was the adjustment from San Antonio, moving to Napa and working in that environment?
It was very intimidating, but it was something that I wanted. Like, and I think when you really want something and you really embrace something, then that makes all the difference, right? So for me, it was like, I was at, I had watched this video that was on HospitaliTV about when they went to go to the French Laundry. Dude, I watched it almost every single night. Yeah. Right? You know what I mean? And so like, it was a welcoming thing for me. It was intense. was hard. I think the hardest part was the culture to get used to.
In what sense?
In the sense that, like, you know, in most restaurants, there's only 2 or 3 people who actually really care. In most restaurants, right? Sometimes that's not even the owner, right? And that's the person that walks around and is like, hey, don't do that. It's policing everybody.
Right.
You know, most restaurants, the manager will come over and break up something, right? And as soon as he turns his back, they go back to doing what they were doing.
Right.
The French Laundry was the first place ever that I had ever been in that it was actually the employees who policed the other employees.
Yep.
So it was a utopia in that sense. Like, you realized that you didn't fit in really quickly. Right? You know, it was like, hey, quit playing grab ass. This is not a bistro.
How do you? That's super interesting to me because I've worked in that environment before when I was at Addison with Noir. Jesse Rodriguez was the web director, and Will was running around with the maitre d', and they weren't policing us. We were. I mean, Will certainly was, but I mean, it was the same thing when I walked in there. I was like, there was just a different level, and everybody was kind of punking you. But it's a very healthy competition too. That keeps you on your toes. How do you create that with the staff? Is it through the hiring process, like finding people, or is it even maybe after you hire, realizing, hey, this guy's in for us, and you get rid of him pretty quickly?
Well, I think it's all of those things, right? I think you set the standard and the bar really high, right? And what was the most amazing thing about working there is that they had the saying, right? And it was just like always the coolest thing to me. It's like you work hard to impress the people that you work side by side with, right? Because there's no customer or guest that's in it the way that we're in it, right? Because we're doing this 18 hours a day, right? And when you do that, when I can impress you, you're like, wow, man, this guy is amazing, right? Any guest that walks through the front door is blown away, right? And I think that is the culture, right? And that is like, there is some competition in it, right? There is this kind of thing like that, but it's like holding everybody to a higher standard. And so let's rewind back. When you go to most restaurants, there's only 1 or 2 people. And I realized when I was working at a place, I was one of those people. And some days you needed people to pick you up. And when there wasn't any, then you were subject to lag. And I remember in my interview with Thomas was like, he asked me why I wanted to work there. And I said, I wanted to work there for the knowledge and for the people, and because I needed discipline. I needed someone else to hold me to a higher standard. On those days that I couldn't hold myself. And that's what I got there. It was just this utopian place to work and it was hard. It was very hard and challenging. I mean, when stuff went wrong, you know, the whole idea was that what could I have done to make this situation better or not happen at all, right? And it could have been your day off, but that was the mentality. I was like, you know, I was, at the beginning when I got there, I was quick to say, well, that wasn't my fault. How's that my fault? And that's the wrong answer. The answer is like, so how could we look at the situation to make sure that this situation never happens again?
So do you remember any situations specifically like that, maybe with like very difficult guests? I mean, I know we get them at every tier in the restaurant business. And maybe something that was ingrained in the culture there that helped you to approach that situation and maybe win that guest over?
I mean, there's always, you know, I think people like to test the greatness of the restaurant. Like they've read that and kind of are testing the hype of the restaurant, so to speak. You know, I remember we had a guest with 6 Top. And I think for most people, they don't understand how much wine they're going to go through that night, you know, and the whole idea is to come up with a game plan before you sit down and get rolling, right? But we had a gentleman, and I remember I can't remember which vintage, it was a vintage focus. It's a 6 Top. He came in. I explained to the gentleman that we only had 2 bottles of that wine left. He agreed and said it was okay. We poured the first bottle, you know, at the particular course. Poured the first bottle, great. He wanted to go to the second bottle, went to the second bottle. I presented it to him, and he said okay, and I let him know it was the last bottle. And then now it came time to came back with the wine lessons to say, hey, you know, we've moved on for this. You know, let's talk about what's next. And, you know, we got a little indignant about this is supposed to be one of the greatest restaurants in the world, and how could you not have this wine? You should go out and get it for me, and all this kind of stuff. And you know, so he was in his feelings, and I had to let him be for a minute so he could, so he could look at the wine list and figure it out. You know, he was kind of showing off to his friends and that kind of stuff. And I remember, and I was like, wait a minute, the Whole Foods downstairs, I believe, actually has Opus. So I ran downstairs, they had Opus, she loaned it to me, and I came back upstairs, with it in a paper bag still, and presented it at the table. And I said, sir, we normally don't do this, but don't get us wrong. Don't get me wrong, we are that restaurant.
Nice.
Right? And I opened it up.
Oh yeah.
And it was just it was just something extra added. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we would go through those links for guests if it was in our means. You know what I mean?
Was there anything else that stood out for you during your tenure at this group that, just like the secret sauce for the group, or something that you noticed there that really brought them together, whether it be, I don't know, relentless staff education, or building people up, or the way that you do your pre-shifts, or the education that's coming from the chef, or
Right.
The connection between front and back of the house. I've heard a lot of in those restaurants too. And what do you think is one of the key things?
I think education is important, right? And so the education was a huge part of that, and the catalyst for this jumpstart the evening was this whole was the pre-shift. The pre-shift meetings were amazing. They were grueling.
What were those like?
Well, pre-shift was like everybody was in on it. Like, you know what I mean? And it was like the smartest guys. You know what I mean? Like, the chef would come out. One of the chefs would come out, and he was talking about this new salt we had. And he said, this salt is 40, something about 45. It comes from a period that's 45 million years old, and that's the Jurassic period or something like that. And then one of the food runners raises their hand and says, "Chef, are you sure? Because 45 million years ago would mean that it was this period. The Jurassic period was 35 million, something like that." And it was like that. Yeah, it was like that. You had a really, like people were talking about, I think it was cashew fruit. Like, we didn't know that, like most people were stunned and knew that the cashew actually has a fruit. I can't remember if it was cashew or breadfruit, but like on one island it was the largest killer of people because the fruit would be so big it would fall off and hit people in the head and kill them, right? You know what I mean? Or injure them. But it was something, you always learned something. It was this quest for information and knowledge that you could present to the guests, and that was really fun. Some days it was tedious in that way that like people competed, but this is a restaurant that hired an ex-ballerina to teach us how to walk through the dining room. So education and how we carried ourselves and those things played a huge role, right? And food knowledge played a huge role. And I think all of by doing all those things instilled the confidence in us to be able to approach tables, knowing that we had the confidence to talk about the things that we were talking about, that made us last, right? It didn't come off as being pretentious, right? Like, we knew that we knew them, and we didn't have to prove them in that way.
Right. So, how do you think social media is changing all this now? And by social media, of course, it's just the state of the internet and what's happening. But we didn't have a lot of those things, 10, 15 years ago, meaning the exposure to see how other people operate in their restaurants.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you think that there's a way that people should be using, specific to this industry in the hospitality business, that they should be using social media to either reach out to their guests or even within their own communities?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Because we weren't allowed to even have our phones on the floor.
Right.
And let's just talk about that. When I opened Per Se in 2004, the smartphone didn't even exist. So there was no such thing as social media. Right? And the idea of taking pictures of bottles at the end of service of what guests consumed would have been a total violation of what was going on in the restaurant, and we would have been fired on the spot.
Right.
So let's just put that out there. I think it's a great thing, and you know what I mean? And I just think about all the things, so for Patrick Capielli, what he was doing of showing the things of what people drank after service, that was awesome. Even think about Michael Madrigal, the things that he was doing to promote, they were pouring a wine by the glass, a Magnum by the glass, I think it was almost every day, and to look at those pictures and things that he took, that meant a lot, and not just necessarily to guests, but to other sommeliers to follow in his footsteps to be, he set the bar, right? And I thought that was really cool. For me, I think social media, I like it to do surprise and delight. Do the research on your guests. We worked at a restaurant where every guest that came in, we Googled them because we wanted to know what they did. But and this is a prime example. There was a food critic who came in. I'm trying to think of the name of his blog at the time, but he had made mention on one of the social media things about something about us making him a hot dog or something. And when he came in, we actually made him a hot dog, and it blew his mind. And that's what I like to use social media for. For us, we reach out to guests all the time and we try to give back. you know, if you're really into basket weaving, I want to do something for you for basket weaving, or incorporate some basket weaving into like something a part of the mill, or something a part of like what we do on the wine side. I think it's a way to be able to monitor the guests that appreciate what you do, and when you reach out back out to them to show that you appreciate what they do or what they're into, I think it just creates a different type of relationship that most people can't understand. If you buy something from me, we shoot a personal thank you video for almost every single one of those people, right? To say thank you, right? And it's not like one blanket one. It's like, hey, so and so, hey, thank you so much for your order most recently. I see you from San Diego. You know, hope the weather's nice. I generally get up there 3 or 4 times a year. I'll definitely look you up. I'd love to buy you a drink. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, to me, the power of that, we buy things every day. We spend money every day on countless things. But when has the owner or the maker of that thing reached back out to you personally to say thank you?
Right.
Right? You know what I mean? Like, Drake's never written me for the albums that I bought. Right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so so for me, I'm always constantly trying to use social media as a way to be able to connect with people, because competition is stiff. And I think like on restaurants the same way, like you should understand your guests better.
Yeah. Well, Andre, I can't thank you enough for your time, man. If somebody wants to find you online, how do we get to you?
It's just my name, Andre H. Mack. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook.
That's the one that includes your Mouton Noir. And
Yeah,
wine
so
and
yeah, we
everything,
just kind of
right?
grouped it together. Yeah, so Facebook, Twitter, you can find our name of our company, Mouton Noir Wines.
Okay.
If you're looking at for my personal, you know, that's kind of where we do all our stuff. You know, it's Andre H. Mack.
Beautiful. So guys, don't forget to follow us. Please check out our page at HospitaliTV on Facebook and Instagram. Go share the content, leave some comments. Hope to see you soon. See you, man.
Pleasure.
Can't thank you enough. Bye.